Hey there. In this episode, we're talking about money, my favorite topic. No, really, I produce podcasts for financial professionals. So if your show has to do with money, I want to manage it. But let's talk about your money. You're about to make an investment in your business to create content and blast it to the world. So knowing what your budget should be is pretty dang important. Not only does it help to learn what the Small Business Administration recommends for your marketing budget as a percentage of your revenue, but it also helps to learn what the investment is to produce the audio, the video, the reels, the copywriting, and all the visuals for your podcast. Most of the time, I find that small businesses have no problem in investing in expensive equipment because they want the best sound and the 4K video. But when it comes to the services needed to produce those well-edited assets for all the platforms, there's a bit of hesitance around making an investment. This is kind of like booking the fanciest venue in town for your wedding, but then having your mother-in-law bake your wedding cake. It's a little misaligned. People don't minimize their editing or post-production budget intentionally. I think it's just a simple oversight and a misunderstanding of the level of expertise or the amount of time it takes to get what you see online to look and sound as beautiful as it does. You're probably guilty, as am I, of looking at what everybody else is doing and how amazing it looks and thinking, well, I want to do that too. And then recognizing like, oh my gosh, this costs thousands of dollars. How is this possible? But it doesn't even make sense to pay just $500 toward equipment if you aren't also going to invest in the coaching and professional editing required to produce a great show. So, misconception number one, I've run into people who thought, I want to create a podcast, and suddenly they're on the hunt for a videographer. You may or may not need a videographer. It really depends on the vibe you're going for with your podcast. But let's be real, a videographer costs money. There is on-hand, in-person expertise that's being administered. They didn't just wake up yesterday and say, I'm going to be a videographer. They have had years of experience and potentially actual education around mood and lighting and the way someone sits or what they're wearing. It really may make a huge difference in your production. On the flip side, not having one also might negatively impact the quality of your recordings. So let's break it down. In my experience, having a videographer is a nice to have, not a must have. Now, if you are really bent on having super clean, professional video and someone on set in person to really nail those angles, a videographer can be great. But let's not confuse them with podcast editors or managers. They are playing in very different lanes, even though we can work really well together. I've had some awesome experiences collaborating with in-person videographers. It's fun. We get to tweak lighting, play with angles, and they are in person, again, on set. And so sometimes they can even advise my client on wardrobe advice or clutter in the background. Their expertise definitely elevates the final product, but, and no offense to the videographers in my life, there have been times where I've been working with someone and I wonder why the heck they're even there. There's bad lighting, there's clutter in the video frame, and shadows on my podcaster's face that could have been avoided. Usually this happens when the client hires the videographer I'm not involved in the situation yet. And so there's no true collaboration between us. And often this is in the case of someone finding like a discount rate videographer. And that's when you end up with having had someone on site, but also bad lighting, clutter, definitely things that could have been coached around and fixed before we even hit record. So if you're thinking about hiring a videographer, do your homework. Ask to see their productions they've already recorded. Ask to see raw video. Ask to see edited video. And that's another really important piece. Ask about editing. Some videographers edit their work. Others just hand off the raw footage. I did my videography, done recording, here you go, we're out. So rates for videography can range from $100 per hour to $500 per hour. You may be able to negotiate a half-day rate or a full-day rate where you record several things back to back to back to make the best use of that videographer's travel and on-site time. For most people, recording online interviews or solo episodes at home like this, a videographer isn't needed. But if you're all about pristine video quality, perfect angles, and having someone manage the recording gear for you in person, especially for interviews with multiple people involved and multiple cameras, a videographer might jump over to your must-have list. Again, it all depends on your vision and what's super important to you. Now, I'm bringing up videographers first in this episode because it is one of the top questions I get from people interested in starting a video podcast. But honestly, it's one of the last things you should worry about, and only if your budget can handle it. There are other services that will give you more bang for your buck when it comes to podcasting for your business. Now, the next question I get often is, okay, I've recorded content. Now what? It's actually super common not to know what to do with your podcast content after it's recorded. And that's whether we're talking audio or video files. Now, of course, you might Google what to do with it, but chances are you'll get overwhelmed because there's a lot of information out there. In short, the content needs to be edited and scheduled on a platform for its go live date. I've said it before and I will say it again, running a business is a full-time job and you don't need to add an editor hat to your list of roles. If your time, let's say, is worth $100 per hour and it takes 4 hours for you to edit a 30-minute episode, you're essentially spending $400 to edit it yourself. Plus, the opportunity cost there is that those 4 hours, you can't be doing anything else. You can't be with your family. You can't be doing some type of money-making activity or coaching someone or working on anything else in your business because you're stuck messing with editing software. Instead, explore hiring an editor for less, freeing you to focus on those money-making activities. So again, evaluate what your personal hourly rate is, and it's pretty normal for an editing job to take up to 3-4 times the length of the raw file. Video editing takes even longer. So if, again, 30-minute episode, it takes you 4 hours, that's $400. I'm willing to bet you can get one 30-minute episode edited professionally for less than that. And then don't forget the time that it takes to schedule and post your content, whether we're talking about inside your podcast host account, to YouTube, to social media. Talk to your editor about whether they include scheduling or if they are just purely editing and then sending you the files. You may not be comparing apples to apples with pricing if you don't realize that one editor actually manages the production all the way through the go live date. In other words, they are in your podcast host account, messing with settings. They are posting it to YouTube for you versus someone else who may just edit and hand the file back to you. So, in summary for this section, know what your time is worth. In most cases, it's better to book more work or clients to cover the cost of outsourcing rather than doing it yourself, saving time and avoiding opportunity costs. So, speaking of editors and opportunity costs for you, here's what you can expect to invest in audio and video editing services. For your audio-only podcast, I suggest a budget range of $500 to $2,000 per month, depending on the length, frequency, and number of participants in your podcast. Here's what I mean. 10 to 20-minute episodes with you as the host, and that's it, are less expensive, while interviews of, let's say, 30 minutes in length are like the mid-range pricing. And then conversational shows with 3 or more participants or like a round style, multi-person expert interview, let's say they're 45-minute long episodes, those are going to be, of course, towards the higher end. For your video podcast, I suggest a budget range of $1,500 to $5,000 per month, depending on the length, the number of participants, because that affects the number of cameras, and the frequency at which you're publishing episodes. Single camera productions for solo episodes like this are less expensive than a 2-person interview with 3 camera angles. And the monthly rate is going to be less for a once-a-month publish than a weekly publish, of course. So there's always room for flex, up or down, but it all starts with you communicating your vision to me or someone similar who can really help you build out what you want in an investment range that you're comfortable with. If you are, shall they say, like a beer budget with champagne taste, you might come to someone saying like, I want to have a 3-person, 4-camera angle, 45-minute long show, but your budget's like $1,000 a month. Okay, well, maybe we could do once a month publish. But, if we shortened those episodes and made some tweaks, we could get a more often publish for a just slightly higher budget range. So there's always fluctuation and availability within that conversation, as long as you're willing to dive in the numbers with someone who's experienced. There's this phenomenon I see quite often where a potential client has a wish list of services, again, based on all the beautiful stuff we see online by the big creators. Now, in Texas, where I grew up, there's this phrase that they say that your eyes were bigger than your stomach. That means that you saw all this amazing food, let's say at the dinner table or at a buffet, you piled your plate high, but you actually can't eat all of that food. So your eyes were bigger than your stomach. Again, podcast editing, whether we're talking audio or video, takes about 3 times the length of the recording to actually work through. Cutting reels can take hours of time, intense work with transition. You've got captions, graphics, and it requires an even higher, sometimes detailed level of talent to create great reels. So before you set the budget for your show, consider what you're asking for, the expertise needed, and the time it takes to produce the assets you want. With services like audio and video editing, you aren't paying for the editor's current time spent editing your episodes, like the 4 hours we were talking about earlier, you're actually buying their years of experience and the technical knowledge they've gained from editing thousands of episodes. And all of that is what gets applied in the current day to your show. So if you think of this another way, would you want a general practitioner performing brain surgery? No. You're going to want the best brain surgeon in your state or region, and you're willing to pay for their experience and expertise. They went to school for this. They have done everything required of their industry to get to the level where they are. And that's the same thing when it comes to audio and video editing or any other kind of technical expertise in a niche. One of the next most often overlooked components when it comes to launching a podcast is the copywriting piece. You need someone to write great titles and descriptions for your episodes. Getting found online by absolute strangers who'd be ideal followers and clients requires you to have keywords and phrases they are searching for in your titles and episodes descriptions. This copywriter needs access and experience with SEO plugins, the subject matter, and these days, AI, to draft a title that's catchy yet informative and a description that sounds human yet includes the best keywords for discoverability. To invest in a podcast-focused copywriter or SEO specialist to create episode titles, we're talking about YouTube descriptions, show notes, any of the written language that belongs with your published podcast, you can expect a range of $100 to $300 per episode for high-quality copywriting. Yes, AI is helpful in this area and somewhat inexpensive at about $40 per month for a good subscription product. However, I caution you not to skimp on your copywriting costs. Many shows that come to me for help with growth have 100 plus episodes already published, but are struggling because there was little to no effort contributed to their episode titles and descriptions. Keywords and phrases that people might actually be searching for are practically non-existent in their titles, and everything I'm seeing as far as like descriptions, titles, key takeaways, call to actions, anything like that are just really vague and basic. I've even seen show notes that are literally one sentence. That's not a good enough description for your episode if you're hoping to be found online by potential followers and ideal clients. Think of it this way. When you create a podcast, you're essentially creating an article in audio or video form. So in just a few steps, an SEO copywriter can increase that episode's likelihood of being found in organic search because of their expertise in using keywords to increase visibility. Now that you have some ballpark costs and you understand the importance of each post-production component, it's time to make a list of your must-haves and your nice-to-haves. You are the only person who can decide whether you want audio and video production or just one or the other. You can choose to be extremely SEO focused with your show and invest more in in-depth keyword research, super rich show notes, multiple blog posts crafted from each of your episodes. I mean, there are no rules, so you can go completely nuts in whatever direction you choose. You could also choose that maybe your social media is most important to you, and you decide that you want 5 to 10 reels cut out of every episode from your podcast. Podcast hosts are moving toward video in droves currently, simply because Reels and YouTube Shorts are driving growth on their accounts. So, does the perception that you need Reels for your podcast make video a must-have for you? Let's see. Let's review the potential investment for each component. We talked about videography being $100 to $500 per hour. We talked about audio editing being anywhere from $500 a month to $2,000 a month. We talked about video editing being $1,500 to $5,000 per month. And we talked about copywriting being anywhere from $100 to $300 per episode, depending on what you're asking for. Reels and shorts, those can be $100 or $200 a piece. And if you're talking full social media management with like posts every day or multiple posts a day, captions, scheduling and posting, analytics reporting, the full 9 yards, you're looking at $1,200 to $2,000 per month. Now, blog posts, we didn't really talk about that. Those can be anywhere from $200 to $500 per article. And then if you think about featuring your podcast or these blogs that are inspired by your podcast on your website, depending on what you need, website edits could be anywhere from $500 to $10,000. And that's generally going to be a one-time cost to add a page or create a podcast website. So it really depends on what you need and what's most important to you. As you can tell, this really adds up, which is why it's important to decide where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck and focus your time, money, and effort in that area. I've had clients come to me wanting to baby step into the podcasting space, starting with an audio-only podcast and show notes and just one new page on their website for the podcast content. A simple connection to my web designer for her work, maybe $2,000, and about a $1,500 to $2,000 launch for the podcast. Not bad. You're on your way. On the other end of the spectrum, and this is much more common, I've had clients come to me for the full list, a multi-page website, the weekly 30-minute podcast, audio and video, Reels every day, full social media management, blogs on their website, and oh, by the way, I want to create a course too. I connect them with my web designer and my course creator, and we coordinate as a team to get this big vision off the ground in a matter of months. And we all have a great time doing it. On a package like this, clients are spending $30 to $40K in a matter of months, where suddenly they have a robust website, a money-making course, content on their YouTube channel, podcast, and all social media platforms. We blow it out for them, and the benefit is that it was all done for them, and they're off to the races. So how does investing this much money in content production make sense for you? Here's one way to figure out what level of investment makes sense based on where you are in your business journey. Evaluate how much one client means to you in terms of monthly income. You may need to dig into your books a little bit, call your CPA, and just learn what your average client pays over the course of a year and that length of time that a typical client is with you. So the total dollar value by month each client is worth to you at this current stage in business. For example, if they buy your $1,000 online class, they pay $500 to attend a webinar and maybe they get some downloads or books and, some coaching. And then they sign on for monthly services at $3,000 per month for 6 months. That one client is worth $19,500 for the year, which divided by 12 is $1,625. So you could invest about $1,600 per month on content production services, properly assuming you will attract one new client per year to your show. Just one per year. Obviously, your intention is to attract more than that. Like one client per month would be awesome. But one client per year would cover your podcast production or online marketing costs. To some businesses, one client means $10K or more per month. So the formula remains. You could spend $10,000 per month on all the videography, YouTube production, podcast promotion, anything you want, because just one new client covers your production cost. Whatever one client means to you, you can spend more if you anticipate speaking opportunities or other additional income because of the podcast. But make sure that you're in line with the Small Business Administration's recommendations, and we'll talk more about those in just a minute. If your business model is lower ticket and higher volume, like you'd typically sell 200 ebooks per month at $27, making $5,400 in revenue monthly, I'd explore just a 10% investment in online marketing. Here's why. The Small Business Administration, or SBA, here in the United States, recommends that small businesses allocate 5 to 10% of their revenue to marketing. So regardless of your structure, I would stay within those guidelines. Now, nobody's going to come get you if you're spending 11% or 12% of your revenue on marketing. But just make sure that your other areas of your business are being funded well, because you don't want your systems or your people or your bookkeeping or anything else to be neglected. If you're spending near 10% or slightly more, I'm going to assume that your business growth goals are big and that you're also working with a coach or you're in a program to ensure that you're taking the correct action steps to grow your business quickly, because it would not make sense to spend near the top end of that percentage and not see growth. The other thing I want to point out is that the Small Business Administration's recommendation is for 5 to 10% of your revenue is spent on marketing. That's all marketing. So you have to know, is podcasting, YouTube, social media, blogs, and whatever else you're considering all of your marketing? Or are you also considering conferences, YouTube, Facebook ads, and other avenues of marketing as well? If so, all of your marketing needs to be within that 5 to 10% range. I will also add, a concentrated effort in one area yields great rewards over time. This concludes episode 28. The third of a 5-episode mini-series to help you podcast well for your business. In episode 26, we examined what podcasting actually is and what you need to get started. Then last week, you learned my secret formula for converting listeners into paying clients. I guess it's not a secret anymore, huh? And in this episode, we talked all about how much money you should invest in your podcast's post-production. In next week's episode, you'll be receiving some pre-recording coaching from me, like how to properly use your microphone, how to look and sound confident on camera, and some lighting and scripting tips so that you look good, feel good, sound great on camera. The final episode of this podcasting mini-series is about measuring ROI from your podcast. So that will go really well in conjunction with this episode. Now, I know that at the end of the day, you're looking for business growth. And if you're investing this time and this money into creating great content for your followers, we need to make it worth it for you. With me, podcasting is more than just hitting record and you have random conversations with people. You and I are both business owners, and I want nothing more than for your business to grow because of the podcast. So we talk about your client rates and your budget, and I customize a service stack that serves you best. I monitor your content and provide feedback on your show's structure, your call to action, your guests, and the topics you cover. I take podcast management to the next level, becoming a true partner in the content creation process with you. You won't mess it up because you have my experienced team doing the technical edits and me working with you, not just to launch your show or at the beginning of your agreement. No. My clients and I have a constant feedback loop, and I routinely perform audits on their shows just to make sure everything's in line. And this is why your investment in podcast production with me is strategic. If you'd like to have a conversation with me about your average client value, revenue, and marketing budget, I'm happy to help you math it out and discover a service stack that aligns with your goals. Get ready to learn all the pre-recording and confidence-giving tips for behind the mic and camera next week. See you then.